Do you know what the most dangerous thing you can say to your child is? It is not an insult. It is not a harsh word. It is not even silence. The most dangerous thing you can say to a child who just brought home a perfect score, who just solved a difficult problem, who just did something that filled your heart with pride, is this: you are so smart. Those 4 words, spoken with love, spoken with the best of intentions, are quietly destroying your child's potential. I know this because I said them to my own daughter. I said them hundreds of times before I understood what I was doing. I am Rabbi Aaron Kaplan. I have spent 38 years working with families and children across New York, New Jersey, Florida, and California. And I want to tell you something that will change the way you speak to your child, starting tonight. Jewish families represent 0.2% of the world's population. Yet Jewish people have received 22% of all Nobel Prizes ever awarded. That is not luck. That is not genetics. That is a system of education that has been refined for over 3,000 years. And one of the most important rules inside that system is about how you respond to your child's success. Today, I'm going to teach you why praising your child for being smart is the fastest way to make them mediocre. And I am going to give you the ancient alternative that Jewish families have used for millennia to build resilience, hunger, and genuine brilliance in their children. Toward the end of this teaching, I will share the exact phrase that my grandfather, Rabbi Mordecai Kaplan, used with every child who came through his classroom in Brooklyn for 47 years. A phrase so simple and so powerful that it rewired how those children saw themselves forever. This is one of the 7 Torah laws of the genius child that I have spent 38 years studying. And once you understand it, you will never praise your child the same way again. My grandfather taught in Brooklyn for nearly 5 decades. 3 generations of families sat in his classroom. Lawyers, doctors, professors, writers, scientists, entrepreneurs. Many of them came back years later to tell him that something he said when they were 7 or 8 years old had stayed with them their entire lives. And here is what I noticed when I was young, sitting in the corner of his classroom, watching him work. He never once told a child they were smart. Never. Not once in all the years I watched him. A child would answer a difficult question correctly, and my grandfather would lean forward and say, "I can see how hard you thought about that. Tell me what happened inside your mind before you answered." He was not interested in the answer. He was interested in the process. He was fascinated by the effort, the reasoning, the struggle. I did not understand why until decades later, when I began studying the Talmud's approach to education with the same rigor I brought to my graduate work at Columbia. What I discovered was that my grandfather was not just being kind. He was applying a principle so ancient and so deeply woven into Jewish pedagogy that most people do not even realize it has a name. In Pirkei Avot, the Ethics of the Fathers, chapter 2, Mishnah 16, Rabbi Tarfon teaches that it is not upon you to finish the work, but neither are you free to desist from it. This teaching is usually interpreted as a statement about perseverance, but my grandfather understood it at a much deeper level. He understood that the moment you tell a child they are smart, you are telling them the work is finished. You are telling them the result is what matters. And when the result is what matters, the child stops working. If you are watching this and you have ever noticed your child avoiding hard tasks, giving up quickly when something is difficult, or becoming anxious before a test even though they are clearly capable, I want you to write the word effort in the comments right now. Because what I am about to teach you will explain exactly why that is happening and what to do about it. Here is the painful truth that most parents do not want to hear. The modern education system has trained us to praise outcomes. Good grade, good boy. High score, you are brilliant. Trophy on the shelf, you are a winner. We do this because it feels right. It feels loving. But what we are actually doing is building a prison inside our child's mind. I have seen this pattern in hundreds of families over 38 years, and it always follows the same progression. First, the child performs well and receives praise for being smart. Second, the child begins to associate their identity with that label. I am the smart one. Third, the child encounters something genuinely difficult, something that challenges them beyond their current ability. And fourth, the child collapses. They refuse to try. They cheat. They have anxiety attacks. They say, I am stupid. Because in their mind, if they cannot solve it easily, they are no longer smart. And if they are no longer smart, they are nothing. This is not speculation. This is exactly what Dr. Carol Dweck at Stanford University documented in over 3 decades of research on what she calls fixed versus growth mindset. Dweck's studies showed that children who were praised for intelligence consistently chose easier tasks, lied about their scores, and showed declining performance over time. Children who were praised for effort chose harder tasks, showed increasing performance, and demonstrated genuine enjoyment of the learning process. But here is what very few people know. Dweck herself has acknowledged that this principle is not new. The Jewish educational tradition understood this concept thousands of years before modern psychology gave it a name. The Talmud in Tractate Barakot 32b teaches that a person should always be soft like a reed and not hard like a cedar. The reed bends in the wind and survives. The cedar stands rigid and is eventually uprooted. The child who is told they are smart becomes the cedar, rigid, brittle, unable to bend when life pushes against them. The child who is praised for effort, for struggle, for the willingness to stay with a hard question becomes the reed, flexible, resilient, unbreakable. There are 3 things that well-meaning parents do that directly contradict this ancient wisdom. The first is labeling the child with a fixed trait. You are smart, you are gifted, you are a natural. The second is removing struggle from the child's path, solving their problems for them, intervening the moment they show frustration. The third is rewarding the result rather than the journey, giving prizes and privileges for grades rather than for the quality of the questions the child asked along the way. Every one of these practices produces the opposite of what the parent intends. And what I learned after years of studying these patterns is that this is not a random collection of tips. It is part of a system of 7 interconnected laws that Jewish families have passed down for generations. When you understand how they fit together, everything changes. I have seen children who were labeled as learning disabled transform into the top students in their schools. I have seen teenagers who had given up entirely rediscover their hunger for knowledge within weeks of their parents shifting how they speak to them. The method I am sharing with you today comes directly from the Talmudic and Torah tradition of how a parent is commanded to educate a child. In the book of Proverbs, Mishlei, chapter 22, verse 6, King Solomon writes, "Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it." For 3,000 years, Jewish scholars have debated what "in the way he should go" actually means. And the consensus across the great commentators, from Rashi to Maimonides, is that it means according to his own way, not the parent's way, not the school's way, not society's way, the child's own way. And praising a child for being smart is the opposite of training them in their own way. It trains them in the way of external validation. It makes them dependent on someone else telling them who they are. Today, I am sharing law number 3 of the 7 Torah laws of the genius child. I call it the law of sacred effort, and it is rooted in one of the most fundamental principles of the entire Jewish intellectual tradition, the principle that the struggle itself is holy. In the yeshiva tradition, when a student is studying Talmud with a chavruta, a study partner, the goal is never to reach the right answer quickly. The goal is to argue, to question, to turn the idea upside down and inside out, to find the contradiction, to sit with confusion until clarity emerges on its own. This process is called pilpul, and it has been the engine of Jewish intellectual achievement for centuries. The Talmud in Tractate Megillah 6b says something extraordinary. It says, if a person tells you, I have labored and I have found, believe him. If he says, I have not labored, but I have found, do not believe him. Read that again carefully. The Talmud is saying that finding without laboring is not real finding. The struggle is not an obstacle to understanding. The struggle is understanding. When you tell your child they are smart, you are telling them that the goal is to find without laboring. You are telling them that intelligence is something you have, not something you build through sacred effort. Maimonides, in his Mishneh Torah, Hilchot Talmud Torah, chapter 3, explains that a person only acquires Torah wisdom through struggle, through sleep deprivation, through persistence when every part of you wants to stop. He is not being cruel. He is describing a psychological truth that modern science has only recently begun to confirm. Dr. Anders Ericsson, whose research on deliberate practice became the foundation for the 10,000-hour rule, showed that expertise in any domain is not the result of natural talent. It is a result of sustained, focused, difficult practice with immediate feedback. This is exactly what the Chavruta system provides. 2 students sitting across from each other, pushing each other, questioning each other, refusing to let each other settle for a shallow understanding. There is no grade. There is no teacher standing over them with a red pen. There is only the sacred obligation to go deeper. The law of sacred effort has 3 dimensions that I want you to understand. The first dimension is language. The words you use when your child succeeds must redirect their attention from the outcome to the process. Instead of saying you are so smart, you say, I can see how much effort you put into this. Instead of saying you are a genius, you say, tell me about the moment when it was hardest, and you kept going. Instead of saying, I am proud of your grade, you say, I am proud that you did not give up when it got difficult. This is not a small change. This is a complete rewiring of how your child understands their own value. The second dimension is environment. In the traditional cheder, the Jewish primary school, children were not separated by ability. A child who struggled with reading sat next to a child who read fluently, and they learned together. The struggling child learned persistence. The fluent child learned patience and how to teach. Both of them learned that knowledge is not a private possession. It is a shared responsibility. In your home, this means creating an environment where struggle is not just tolerated, but honored. When your child comes to you frustrated because they cannot solve a math problem, your first response should not be to help them solve it. Your first response should be to say, good. This is where real learning happens. Stay with it a little longer. The third dimension is time. The law of sacred effort does not produce results in a single afternoon. The Talmud speaks of learning in cycles, returning to the same material 7 times, each time understanding it at a deeper level. Patience is not optional. It is structural. When I applied this law with my own daughter, who had been labeled as learning disabled at age 6, I did not see changes overnight, but I saw them within weeks. The first change was that she stopped saying, "I cannot do this," and started saying, "I have not figured this out yet." That single shift in language from cannot to have not yet was the sign that the law was working. Within 3 years of consistent application of the 7 Torah laws, she was performing at the top of her class. She went on to graduate summa cum laude from Yale University. But I want to be honest with you. This law, applied alone, is not enough. It becomes 10 times more powerful when combined with the other laws in the system. There are dimensions of the complete method, particularly how sacred effort connects to the way you structure your child's weekly learning rhythm and how you use the Shabbat as a cognitive reset, that I cannot fully teach in a single video. Those connections are what turn a good principle into a transformational system. There was a period about 15 years ago when I became so busy with consulting work that I neglected these practices in my own home. My son was 12 at the time, and I fell into the trap of praising his results because it was faster, because it was easier, because I was tired. Within 6 months, I watched his curiosity begin to dim. He stopped asking questions at dinner. He stopped reading for pleasure. He started caring only about grades. It took me almost a year to repair the damage, and it was a humbling reminder that these laws are not something you learn once and then forget. They require daily practice, daily intention, daily commitment. I share this because I want you to know that even someone who has spent 38 years studying these principles can fall short when he stops being intentional. In today's educational environment, where children are constantly ranked, tested, scored, and compared, the pressure to praise outcomes is enormous. Schools are designed around measurement, but measurement is not education. And the families who understand the difference are the ones whose children thrive. I have spent 4 decades organizing these 7 laws into a complete system. My grandfather taught them to me separately, scattered across years of conversation and observation. It took me decades to understand how they connect, how each one amplifies the others, how the system only reaches its full power when all 7 laws are practiced together. Let me leave you with 3 things to carry with you from this teaching. First, the words you use when your child succeeds matter more than the success itself. Praise the effort, the struggle, the process, never the label. Second, struggle is not the enemy of learning. Struggle is learning. The Talmud teaches that wisdom acquired without labor is not wisdom at all. Third, this law, the law of sacred effort, is one piece of a much larger system. It works on its own, but it transforms lives when practiced alongside the other 6 laws. You now have knowledge that most parents will never receive, not because it is hidden, but because the modern world has forgotten it. Use this knowledge with intention and with love. In my next teaching, I will reveal another of the 7 Torah laws of the genius child, one that connects directly to what you just learned today. It addresses the single most important moment of your child's day, a moment that most parents waste entirely without realizing it. If this teaching spoke to you, subscribe to this channel and turn on the notification bell so you do not miss what is coming. Share this video with one parent who needs to hear it. Leave a comment telling me what you are going to change in how you speak to your child this week. And if you found value here, a like helps more families discover these ancient teachings. Raise them with wisdom. Shalom.